My name is Kwame Pitts. I guess I self-identify as, we talk about pronouns, she, her,
Sure,
hers.
however you want to,
As far as culturally and with ethnicity, I'm a woman of African descent and of Creole heritage. Mm-hmm. My roots go far as back to Ghana, where probably most of our family were unfortunately taken, kidnapped from, and brought here to the United States as slaves. Mm-hmm. So my mother is sort of the family historian. She is a retired Chicago public teacher and taught African American history, world history, etc. But she's always been very interested in history, and she's done her research. So we do know that one of the very first relatives that we can actually identify by name was born in 1872. Mm-hmm. So that's about 10 years after the Civil War ended.
Right.
So we do know about that, and that's how we go forward. But before that, based on just a number of historical things and her research, that probably most of our family came from Ghana, which is why she named me Kwame after Kwame Nkrumah, which was the first president of Ghana. So that carries a lot of weight and responsibility in the name because of the revolutionary things that he did, and his fight for his people to be just as profitable as the European colonizers who came in and subsequently attempted to destroy all of Ghana.
Right, thanks.
So I identify as a person of African descent living in exile in the United States. I do not identify as an American because my people here are not seen as human.
Right.
And so I cannot identify as an American. I will not call myself African American. I am a person of African descent. I'm a woman of African descent because that's where my roots are. My roots are still in the motherland, still in Africa, still in Ghana. The problem is that we've been ripped from everything, so we don't know. I don't know specifically the tribe. Right. I probably will never know the tribe. And in fact, in all aspects, the tribe that my people came from could have been completely wiped out because of slavery, because of all of the violence, because of the forced colonization. So that's kind of how I identify. I know a lot of people simply say I'm African American, Pan-African, but I just say I'm a person of the African diaspora because it means so much more. It's not just Africa, it's we're everywhere in this world, and so that's why I said diaspora. And it also includes places where people don't think, well, you can't consider them to be African American, but they're African roots in places like Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, and especially with Haiti and Jamaica and all those other places and all of the islands. So that's how I self-identify. So currently, I'm serving as associate pastor for campus ministry here at Augustana. That means that I am one of the religious advisors for the University of Chicago. But here at Augustana, because I'm connected with the University of Chicago, I'm in two different spaces. This community, who was very academic, I think, in their very early years, has really now come into this place where they're trying to figure out, so how do we live our faith out through action? And they want to be prompted, and they want to be challenged.
Sure.
And they're very involved. We've got the High Park Refugee Center right here, and we're doing a lot of that work in the community. Our congregation is very involved in that. I never thought I would come to seminary, so this is all still very new to me, even though I've been in seminary 4 or 5, 6 years, and I've been serving for 3 or 4 years. This is still all new to me. One of the things that I feel like is a self-awareness of who I am. I think that's important because the only way that you're going to be able to be in community with other people is who you know who you are. So the self-awareness of that, and that I'm grounded and rooted. The fact that I am a sacred body, that I can be authentic, and that's what God calls me to do, then enables me to then be in relationship with others and connect with others, even in those difficult, uncomfortable moments. But I think a lot of the writing and the education that I have acquired also helps me actually do the theology, not just something academic where we write a bunch of papers and we say. This actually does what I'm doing. and just a willingness to be involved. You know, I think a lot of it being moved by the Holy Spirit. I mean, those are, you know, and my role as a woman of color in this society, you know,
right.
my whole self, because I bring a different sort of aspect of what's been happening. I give people a clearer picture. They may say, well, we see this. And I say, okay, now you need to understand it from my point of view, what I have seen, what I've experienced, what my family experienced, all those things. So I have been stereotyped as being the model minority. I came from a middle-class home. Even though I was a single parent, my mother was very educated. So she had her own house. She worked as a teacher. She rose in the ranks. I did ballet. I did swimming. We went on trips, all of those things. So I was that model minority. I went to the right schools. We did some of the right things. We went to an African-American Lutheran church that was still carved by the Lutheran denomination, i.e. mostly white. How we did things. I was the right type of young African-American woman in that I stuck very close to my mother and I was very proper and all those things. So those are the stereotypes, which meant that many people thought that, well, because I had now assimilated to what it means to me to be American, that anything and everything would go with me.
Right.
I think that is what, now I don't know what people think of me, going from dreads to this furrow that I'm wearing. You know, they've got folks walking around with these Make America Great Again hats, so I'm like, at this point I'm going to wear whatever t-shirt I want to wear,
right.
And I don't care if you stare at me. So they probably think, oh, she's a rebel, she's all this sort of stuff, she's, you know, all these things. But these are just sort of caricatures of me. You won't know me until you sit down and get to actually talk with me.
Right.
And talk to me as another human being, regardless of my color or my background, etc. You have to talk to me as a human being. If you do not talk to me as a human being, you do not respect my humanity. I do not have to respect you at all, and I can dismiss you. And I'm very good about dismissing people and be like, no, you have no bearing in my life at all because you refused it. When you decide you can talk to me as a human being, then we can sit down and have a conversation.
You're on in your life.
You know, one of the things that I realized later on in life, and I hadn't realized it before because to realize it meant it really didn't make any sense why it was such a big deal. My mother raised me to be very proud of who I am. She taught me my history.
Right.
So I could walk into any room and not feel ashamed and not feel like I had to assimilate or try to act white or anything else that I wasn't. Because I already knew I was an African-American woman.
Right.
I knew the language, I knew the history, I knew the culture. My mother did all of that for me. She rooted me in all that. So I was able, again, like I say, to exist in a lot of spaces. I think one of the things that's always very difficult for African Americans and folks of color is that there is this perception that if you don't have a particular type of education, that you can't be in spaces and therefore you're not allowed. And I think this is also not taught. So not teaching folks about their history and saying we came from kings and queens, we came from we came from civilization. We are the heart of civilization. This is who we are. Not teaching that and not drilling that into them and not showing them examples then breaks down on people, and then that's when the trauma and the oppression that's in our DNA and all those things comes out, and then we become broken.
Right.
So this was already taught to me, and so I've taught it to my kids. I'm like, y'all are proud of who you are. You all should be proud. This is where you came from. We've always told them that.
Sure.
So one of the things that I'm doing right now is working with SOUL, which is Southsiders United for Liberation and Justice. They have a new executive director, Tanya Watkins, and so Tanya and I are working together, along with, of course, all of the clergy, but really working about local issues. What are things that are affecting people of color right here on the south side of the city? what do we have to lift up and what do we have to make sure we're arming our people to do so they can go out and fight and do the same sort of things that we're doing. This is not just like we're going to lead you. No, let's give you the tools, let's train you, and then send you out. So I'm passionate about that. I've been very passionate about the formerly incarcerated and our folks that are imprisoned. Again, every Sunday we talk about the respecting one another. And yet, Christianity has demonized people who have gone into prison. Regardless of whether they have, if you've committed a crime, yes, you have to face some sort of punishment. What that looks like does not mean it has to look like so much that it's so much violated that when you come out, you're beyond broken. Right. And when you come out, what happens? How are you welcomed back in the community? And then welcomed back into the fold and given the opportunities to show that yes, you have been redeemed. Yes, you're willing now to be a citizen. With the formerly incarcerated and with others is the whole aspect of ritual in our lives. So, for example, there's no ritual to welcome people who have been incarcerated back into the community. So what would that look like? Right. And there's only been one church in Chicago that's actually done something like that, and that's Trinity UCC. And I'm still, Otis Moss, and I still have to sit down and have a conversation about how did that all go. There's so many different rituals that could help in cases of trauma. Adoption is a trauma. Being incarcerated is a trauma. Experiencing a crime is a trauma. Experiencing legal violence with the police is a trauma. All those things. How do we incorporate ritual into our daily lives? Because it's missing. Just the fact of womanist theology, and being a womanist myself. How can womanist theology be actually pulled to the forefront? It already is, in a sense. But it still does not have legitimacy in a lot of places because they're like, oh, well, that's just black people things. Just like black liberation theology is touted by progressive Christian denominations, and look, we do this, but in essence, we don't. Because of what liberation theology calls people into, and it calls people who have been a part of a racist system in a denomination, what it calls them to change and transform.
Sure.
Well, definitely my mother, Myrtis Brown, who was one of the first African American women to teach African American history in the high schools here in the Chicago school system. She was the other one who is now ancestor is my grandmother, Hazel Brown. My grandmother didn't really do a lot. It wasn't a lot in the public eye, right? She literally just cooked and taught me and loved me. She held court from her house where the family gathered, and anywhere she was, that's where we all were at her feet. Dr. Tracy Hucks is someone that I've met. Dr. Tracy Hucks wrote a book about African American nationalism and Yoruba theology. She is a practitioner in Ifa. One of the reasons why Dr. Hucks is so profound is because she is very bold in her faith. I mean, she obviously experienced the Christian denomination, but she chooses the path of Ifa. And so that's pretty profound because Ifa, Voodoo, Santeria, all of those have been demonized for years. Sure. And she's been very bold in identifying who she is. Dr. Monica Coleman, another woman who has talked about her issues with bipolarism, but also is a devotee of Ifa. So these women, one of the reasons why I name them is because they're not afraid to name their spirituality. I have this dual spirituality that I continue to walk with that will never go away, regardless of what the American ideology tells me. That even thinking or acknowledging these, which are clearly our spiritual paths as a people, as African people, that Yoruba, Voodoo, Ifa, Candomblé, Santeria, all of these things are part of our walk. It's not just Christianity. And anywhere in Africa in a different time, we celebrate the Creator in very different ways. So that's why folks like Monica Coleman and Dr. Hucks are like pretty profound. I've met